October 6, 1941. Western Russia. Just after dawn. Cold mist hangs low over the forest line, clinging to the muddy ground like a living thing. Overnight rain has turned the road into a brown swamp. Boots sink with every step. Engines struggle. The smell of wet earth and diesel fills the air. A German Panzer III platoon sits idle at the edge of a clearing. Tank commanders lean out of their hatches, binoculars raised, scanning the fog. Somewhere ahead, Soviet armor has been reported. The men are confident, too confident. One German lieutenant laughs quietly. Russian tanks, he says. Slow, blind, poorly built. Another crewman spits into the mud. They make tractors, not machines of war. The men chuckle. Then the ground begins to shake. At first, it feels like distant thunder, a low vibration creeping through the mud, through the tracks, through the bones. The laughter fades. From the mist, a dark shape emerges. Then another. Then dozens. Steel monsters burst out of the fog, wide tracks tearing through mud that should have trapped them. Their hulls are sloped sharply, shells glancing off at strange angles. They move fast. Too fast. Too fast. T-34s. The German lieutenant lowers his binoculars slowly. What is that? You can almost feel the shock hit him. The German guns open fire. Shells slam into the Soviet tanks but ricochet away, sparks flashing uselessly across angled armor. One Panzer round hits square on. The T-34 does not stop. It accelerates. The Soviet tank roars forward, suspension absorbing craters and debris like they aren't even there. Its tracks grip the mud where German tanks bog down helplessly. Inside the Panzer III, a gunner shouts. Direct hit! Why isn't it burning? Another shell bounces off. The T-34 answers. Its 76mm gun fires. The Panzer erupts in flame. In seconds, German confidence turns into panic. Orders are shouted. Radios crackle. Tanks reverse, engines screaming as they struggle against the mud. The Soviet machines keep coming, faster than anything the Germans have faced before. One German commander screams into his radio. These tanks are not what we were told. The battlefield collapses into chaos. And in that moment something breaks. Not a tank. An illusion. The tank that shouldn't exist. The Red Army never pretended the T-34 was perfect. Its optics were poor. Its crew ergonomics were cramped. Its radios were unreliable. Even Soviet commanders complained. But none of that matters when the shells bounce off and the tank keeps moving. German crews had trained to fight slow, boxy machines, tanks that followed roads, tanks that bogged down in bad terrain. The T-34 ignores the rules. It cuts across fields, plows through mud, climbs slopes German engineers said were impossible. A Panzer commander watches helplessly as his tank sinks axle-deep in sludge, while a T-34 races past him, turret already rotating. He mutters something no German officer wants to admit. We can't catch them. Another German unit tries flanking fire. The T-34 simply changes direction. It is not elegant. It is not refined. It is relentless. From mockery to fear. Only weeks earlier, German intelligence briefings dismissed Soviet armor as outdated. Factories rushed production, poor workmanship, inferior design. The T-34 was considered a curiosity. A mistake. Now German crews whisper about it with a different tone. Not laughter. Respect. And fear. A German sergeant who survives the encounter later writes, "It was like fighting the future with weapons from the past. What he does not know yet is that this tank will force Germany into a desperate race they cannot win. Because the T-34 is not just beating German tanks. It is exposing something far worse. Germany's industrial limits. And soon, in Berlin, engineers will panic. Designers will rush. And an entirely new tank will be born out of fear. But before that happens, the Red Army will learn just how powerful their flawed machine really is." Kharkov. Winter 1941. A frozen rail yard. Snow crunches under boots as Soviet officers walk slowly around a line of newly delivered T-34s. The tanks sit half buried in ice, exhaust pipes steaming in the bitter cold. Their hulls are scarred, paint-chipped, welds rough and uneven. These are not parade machines. They are tools. One Red Army colonel climbs onto the hull of a T-34 and peers through the commander's hatch. He frowns immediately. "The optics are terrible," he mutters. "I can barely see a thing." Another officer squeezes into the turret, shoulders brushing steel. "Too cramped," he says. "Loader can barely move." A third taps the radio set and shakes his head. Half of them don't work. There is no pride in their voices, only frustration. The Red Army did not design the T-34 to be comfortable, or elegant, or easy to command. They designed it to survive. And in 1941, survival is all that matters. A tank built for a nightmare. Soviet designers knew something the Germans underestimated. Russia is not Europe. Its roads dissolve into mud. Its winters freeze steel solid. Its distances devour engines and men alike. The T-34 was built for that nightmare. Wide tracks spread its weight, letting it glide over mud that swallowed German armor. A simple, rugged Christie suspension absorbs terrain that would snap lesser machines apart. Sloped armor turns direct hits into glancing blows, forcing enemy shells to waste their energy. Inside the factory, no one cares if the welds look pretty. They care if the tank keeps moving. A Soviet engineer once sums it up perfectly. If it drives and fires, it is good enough. And in war, good enough can be deadly. German reports begin to change. Back at the front, German after-action reports pile up. Panzer commanders write the same words again and again. Our guns ineffective. Enemy armor too fast. Shells deflecting. Unable to disengage. At first, higher command dismisses these reports as exaggeration. German tank doctrine has worked flawlessly across Poland, France, and the Balkans. Why should Russia be different? But then captured Soviet tanks are examined. German engineers crawl over the hulls with tape measures and calipers. They fire test rounds. They measure angles. One engineer mutters under his breath. "This armor, it's sloped deliberately." Another nods. "And the tracks, look how wide they are." A third looks uneasy. They built this thing to fight here. For the first time, German confidence cracks. Speed changes everything. On the battlefield, the T-34's greatest weapon is not its gun. It is speed. German Panzer III and WWII tanks rely on roads and firm ground. Their narrower tracks dig in. Their engines strain. Their suspensions shake. The T-34 does not slow down. It attacks from directions German commanders do not expect. It appears where maps say tanks cannot go. It retreats before German reinforcements arrive. A German company commander watches his unit collapse as Soviet tanks sweep around his flank. They're not fighting us, he realizes. They're hunting us. The Red Army begins to exploit this advantage. Hit fast. Move constantly. Never stay still. Even when Soviet crews struggle to see through poor optics, they rely on movement, aggression, and numbers. And numbers are coming. The factory war begins. Deep inside the Soviet Union, far from the front, factories roar day and night. Entire plants have been dismantled and moved east beyond German bombers. Women, teenagers, and old men work 12-hour shifts in freezing halls, welding armor plates and fitting engines. Production lines never stop. Quality control is sacrificed for speed. If a tank breaks after 200 kilometers, that is acceptable, because by then it will already have fought. German intelligence finally understands the scale of the problem. They are not fighting a single tank. They are fighting an idea. A tank that is simple enough to be built by the thousands. Cheap enough to be replaced. Strong enough to dominate terrain. A German officer writes bitterly, "We destroy 10 and 20 more appear." The moment Berlin panics. By early 1942, the reports reach the highest levels. Hitler demands answers. How can inferior machines defeat German engineering? The answer no one wants to say out loud is simple. Because the machine fits the war. German tanks are precise instruments. The T-34 is a hammer. And hammers thrive in chaos. Design officers in Germany are suddenly under pressure. Engineers are ordered to design something that can defeat the T-34 head-on. Thicker armor. More powerful guns. Better mobility. Time is short. Mistakes are allowed. Because the next German tank must do one thing above all else. Stop the T-34. And in their desperation, Germany is about to create something powerful, but also something that will drain their resources faster than they can replace them. The race has begun. And it will end badly. Eastern Front. Spring 1942. Open steppe near Kharkov. The snow has melted, but the ground is worse than before. Mud stretches to the horizon, swallowing boots, trucks, and confidence. German supply columns crawl forward at walking speed. Engines overheat. Tracks slip. Crews curse the land as much as the enemy. Ahead of them, Soviet armor is already moving. T-34s surge across the steppe in loose formations, engines roaring, suspensions flexing as they bounce over terrain that should stop them cold. Their turrets swing constantly, scanning through poor optics, relying on instinct and coordination rather than clarity. A German Panzer III commander wipes sweat from his eyes and stares through his sight. "I can't get a clean shot," he says. They won't stop moving. The truth is brutal. The Germans are fighting yesterday's war. Doctrine meets reality. German armored doctrine was built on precision, coordinated movement, clear lines of sight, carefully planned engagements. The Eastern Front destroys all of that. Here, battles are chaotic, distances are vast, weather changes by the hour, maps become useless, radios fail, roads disappear. The T-34 thrives in this chaos. It does not need perfect coordination. It does not need ideal conditions. It does not need comfort. It needs fuel. It needs ammunition. It needs a direction. German tanks, heavier and more complex, begin to suffer. Maintenance crews work constantly just to keep engines running. Spare parts lag behind the front. Breakdowns become common. A German mechanic shakes his head beside a disabled Panzer. "These machines were built for Europe," he says quietly. "Not this." A battlefield lesson written in steel. German crews begin to adapt tactics out of desperation. They aim for tracks. They try side shots. They coordinate ambushes. Sometimes it works, but more often the T-34 escapes. It accelerates out of danger. It changes direction. It disappears into terrain no German tank dares to follow. A surviving German officer writes later, "We could hit them, but we could not finish them." The T-34 does not need to win every engagement. It only needs to survive long enough to fight again. And it does. Fear spreads up the chain. By mid-1942, fear is no longer limited to the front. Reports reach Berlin describing units being outmaneuvered by what were once dismissed as crude machines. Maps are annotated with notes like, "Enemy armor mobility exceptional. Cannot pursue effectively. Losses mounting." Senior officers begin to realize something uncomfortable. Germany is losing the mobility war. And mobility is everything. The decision that changes everything. Inside German design bureaus, a new priority takes shape. No more incremental improvements. No more patches. They need a new tank. One that combines sloped armor, heavy firepower, and speed. One that can finally catch and kill the T-34. Engineers sketch furiously. Prototypes are rushed. Testing is shortened. Warnings are ignored. Because every month without an answer costs lives. One engineer reportedly says, "We are not designing the best tank. We are designing the fastest answer." That answer is given a name, Panther. But rushing innovation has a price. And the price will be paid on the battlefield. The T-34 keeps running. While Germany scrambles, Soviet factories continue to flood the front with armor. Simpler designs mean faster production. Crews receive minimal training, but there are always more tanks. A Soviet commander watches another column of T-34s roll past and smiles grimly. "They complain our tanks are ugly," he says. "Let them." He watches the dust rise behind them. They will see them anyway. The Germans are about to face their answer to the T-34, but they do not yet understand the cruel irony. In trying to beat the T-34, they will create a machine too complex, too fragile, and too late. And by the time the Panther arrives in numbers, the war will already be slipping through their fingers. Germany. Early 1943. A frozen proving ground. Snow crunches under boots as German engineers and officers gather around a new machine. It sits low and wide on the white ground, angular and menacing. Sloped armor plates catch the pale winter light. A long, powerful gun points forward like a challenge. The Panther. This is Germany's answer to the T-34. An officer circles it slowly, nodding. "At last," he says, "something worthy." The engine roars to life. The tank lurches forward, tracks biting into frozen earth. On paper, it is everything Germany wanted. Better armor. A devastating gun. Modern design. But paper does not fight wars. Rushed into fire. The Panther is pushed into combat before it is ready. Factories are ordered to deliver numbers, not perfection. Engineers protest. They warn about transmission failures, about engines overheating, about parts that have not been tested in real conditions. They are ignored. There is no time. By summer, Panthers roll toward the Eastern Front, crews barely trained, manuals still unfinished. At Kursk, the largest armored battle in history, the Panther makes its debut. And almost immediately, problems appear. Engines fail after short marches. Transmissions break under strain. Fuel leaks ignite fires. More Panthers are lost to mechanical failure than enemy fire in the opening days. A German tank commander pounds his hatch in frustration. "We built a monster," he shouts, "and it's eating itself." Meanwhile, the T-34 keeps coming. Across the battlefield, T-34s swarm forward in relentless waves. They are not perfect. They break. They burn. Crews die. But there are always more. Soviet tactics evolve. They use numbers. They exploit terrain. They overwhelm German positions from multiple directions. The T-34 does not need to be better one-on-one. It only needs to be there. A German officer watches his carefully planned, defensive line crumble. "They're everywhere," he whispers. "We destroy one, and two replace it." The Panther, powerful but fragile, cannot keep up with the tempo of war. Every breakdown costs time. Every repair requires scarce parts. Every loss hurts more than Germany can afford. A war of production, not perfection. The contrast becomes brutal. The T-34 is built for mass production. Welds are crude but strong. Components are simplified. Factories churn them out under bombardment and freezing conditions. The Panther requires skilled labor, precision machining, and time Germany no longer has. A German industrial report admits the truth. For every Panther built, the enemy produces multiple tanks. The math is unforgiving. And math wins wars. The realization spreads. By late 1943, German commanders understand the bitter reality. The Panther is a superb weapon. But it is not a solution. It cannot be produced fast enough. It cannot be maintained easily. It cannot replace losses at the rate the war demands. Meanwhile, the T-34 evolves quietly. Improved optics, better radios, new variants. The Red Army learns from experience and adapts. What began as a crude tank becomes a refined instrument of destruction. A German general writes in his diary, "The Russian tank we mocked has become the backbone of their victory." The turning point approaches. As the front shifts westward, the initiative changes hands. German units retreat more often than they advance. Fuel shortages worsen. Replacement tanks arrive too slowly. The T-34 continues to outrun and outfight German armor, not because it is perfect, but because it fits the war it is fighting. The lesson is clear, even if it is painful. Elegance does not win battles. Reliability does. Mobility does. Numbers do. And Germany has lost all three. The war has turned. And the tank that was once laughed at is now setting the pace. The final act of this story is not about machines. It is about what they taught the world, Eastern Front. 1944. Somewhere west of Kiev. The ground shakes again. Not from a single breakthrough, not from a desperate counterattack, but from momentum. Columns of T-34s roll forward under low clouds, engines growling in unison. Infantry moves with them now, coordinated, practiced. This is no longer improvisation. This is experience hardened into doctrine. The Red Army has learned how to fight with this tank. And it shows. German defensive lines crumble faster than they can be rebuilt. What were once carefully planned strongpoints are now speed bumps. Soviet armor does not pause to admire victory. It flows around resistance, cutting supply lines, forcing retreats. A German officer watches from a ruined farmhouse as T-34s surge past his position. They don't stop, he says quietly. They don't need to. From survival to mastery. In 1941, the T-34 was a blunt instrument. Crews struggled with poor visibility. Coordination was limited. Losses were horrific. By 1944, that's changed. New versions arrive with improved optics. Radios are standard. Crews are better trained. Tactics are refined. The tank that once relied purely on speed now works as part of a system. Artillery softens defenses. Infantry protects flanks. Air power disrupts German movement. The T-34 strikes where resistance is weakest and disappears before a counterblow can form. German commanders feel the difference immediately. This isn't chaos anymore, one reports. This is control. The psychological collapse. The effect is not just physical. It is mental. German crews no longer laugh at Soviet armor. They scan the horizon constantly, aware that T-34s can appear from forests, fields, frozen rivers, anywhere. The sound of wide tracks in the distance tightens stomachs. A Panther commander admits to a comrade, if they get close, they'll outmaneuver us. If they stay far, there are too many. There is no comfortable range. No safe assumption. The war has turned into a test of endurance Germany cannot pass. Numbers become destiny. Soviet factories continue producing T-34s at staggering rates. Losses are replaced faster than German intelligence can track them. A destroyed T-34 is not a tragedy. It is an expense already accounted for. German industry cannot match this logic. Each lost Panther represents skilled labor, rare materials, and time that no longer exists. The imbalance grows with every month. One German staff officer writes bluntly, "We are not losing battles. We are losing arithmetic." The world takes notes. Allied observers study the Eastern Front closely. Reports flow to Britain and the United States. They note the same conclusion. The T-34 is not the most comfortable tank, not the most sophisticated, not the most precise, but it is the most appropriate. It matches terrain. It matches logistics. It matches industrial reality. After the war, tank designers across the world will copy its lessons. Sloped armor, wide tracks, simplicity over elegance. The T-34 becomes the blueprint. The end approaches. By late 1944, German retreats accelerate. Fuel shortages cripple armored units. Repair depots empty. Crews abandon vehicles they can no longer maintain. T-34s press forward relentlessly. Through Poland. Into East Prussia. Toward Berlin. The tank that was once mocked as crude is now the spearhead of collapse. And with every kilometer gained, the truth becomes unavoidable. Germany did not lose because the T-34 was perfect. Germany lost because the T-34 was enough. And that may be the most dangerous kind of weapon ever built. The final realization is still coming. It will arrive not with a battle, but with silence. Berlin. Spring 1945. The city is collapsing. Smoke drifts through shattered streets. Rubble chokes intersections. The sound of artillery never truly stops. German resistance is fractured, exhausted, running on fumes and hope. And rolling through the ruins, T-34s. Their hulls are scarred. Paint is burned away. Some carry chalk slogans. Others bear the marks of dozens of battles. They are not elegant machines. They are survivors. A German soldier watches one grind past a wrecked Panther, its massive gun useless, its engine silent. He shakes his head slowly. "We built monsters," he says. "They built enough." The final judgment. The war ends soon after. When historians begin dissecting what happened, they argue endlessly about strategies, generals, and mistakes. But almost all of them return to the same object. The T-34. Not because it was flawless, but because it forced a change. It proved that mobility could beat firepower, that production could beat perfection, that adapting to terrain mattered more than elegance. German engineers built brilliant machines. The Soviets built a machine that fit reality. And reality always wins. The irony no one expected. The Red Army never truly loved the T-34. They criticized it constantly. They complained about its optics, its cramped turret, its rough construction. But when the war demanded speed, endurance, and sacrifice, the T-34 answered every time. The tank that was dismissed as crude did exactly what it was supposed to do. It carried men forward when nothing else could. Lessons that shaped the future. After the war, nations across the world study the wreckage. Tank designers take notes. Military planners change doctrines. Sloped armor becomes standard. Wide tracks become essential. Reliability becomes king. The ghost of the T-34 rolls on in every modern armored vehicle. Its influence outlives the war that forged it. The last word, German crews mocked the T-34. They laughed at its rough welds and poor visibility. They stopped laughing when it outran them. They stopped laughing when it outflanked them. They stopped laughing when it outlasted them. The T-34 did not win the war alone, but it changed how wars are fought. And in doing so, it made sure that laughter never returned.